all of us could tell the story of our state, a part of our country, based upon the things that are going on at that particular moment. I mean, historians, as you well know, context is everything. It's not just the person, it's the person in relationship to other people, the person in relationship to the times.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining this American Inspiration event presented in partnership with the Boston Public Library, State Library of Massachusetts, and GBH Forum Network. It's great to have you with us tonight in the land of history, looking at the experience of Black Americans and the national holiday of Juneteenth. I'm Margaret Talcott, Director of Literary Programs at American Ancestors New England Historic Genealogical Society. On your screen is the schedule for our hour-long event featuring historian Annette Gordon-Reed and her remarkable book, On Juneteenth, which is just out in paperback. We're fortunate that Professor Gordon-Reed will be in discussion with Lisa Baldez, a professor at Dartmouth College. Of course, the real education comes beyond tonight. The real education comes with enlightenment from reading On Juneteenth, which has been heralded by the critics. The Washington Post, Time Magazine, and the New York Times heralded as a timely history lesson, profound and personal in its exploration of the ways history shapes our lives. Gordon-Reed shows that historical understanding is a process, not an end point. These reviews are glowing. The book deserves all this praise. It's short and it's deeply thought-provoking. I highly recommend reading it. Copies of On Juneteenth can be purchased through our partners at Porter Square Books in Cambridge, Mass. Use the code AMINS22 as you order, and the book you receive will be signed by the author on a bookplate. You'll see more information about that in the chat. But now for some introductions over to my partners. Kristen, welcome, and Beth, over to you.
Thank you, Margaret. From the Boston Public Library, I'm Kristen Motti. I am an adult programs librarian at the Central Library. We are pleased to be here in partnership with NEHGS, the State Library of Massachusetts, the GBH Forum Network, and Porter Square Books to share tonight's conversation. And we're so glad that you're here with us. Now I have the honor of telling you just a little bit about tonight's featured author. Professor Annette Gordon-Reed is the Carl M. Loeb University Professor at Harvard University. Author of the Pulitzer Prize-winning book, The Hemingses of Monticello, An American Family, she lives in New York and Cambridge, Mass. We'll meet Professor Gordon-Reed in a moment. Now to introduce this evening's moderator is Beth Carroll Horrocks from the State Library of Massachusetts. Beth, over to you.
Thank you, Kristen, and hello, everyone. A very quick hello from the State Library of Massachusetts. I'm Beth Carroll Horrocks, the head of special collections there. So we're grateful to be here again with our partners from American Ancestors, the Boston Public Library, and GBH Forum Network to share information about our collections and interests with such a great audience. So tonight's conversation with Professor Annette Gordon-Reed will be a special treat for those of us who are interested in a topic that some of us, unfortunately, knew little about before we read her book. So Professor Gordon-Reed will be in conversation tonight with Professor Lisa Baldez, a professor of government and Latin American, Latino, and Caribbean studies at Dartmouth College. According to her faculty page, her research and publications examine the extent to which formal institutional rules shape the possibilities for achieving gender equality. Among her many publications is the prize-winning Defying Convention, U.S. Resistance to the UN Treaty on Women's Rights. So we will hear more from Professor Baldez very soon. Now back to Margaret for a minute, who will get the program started.
Thank you, Kristen, and thank you, Beth. And Annette Gordon-Reed, welcome to you. It's a tremendous honor to have you with us tonight, telling us a bit about your work before you welcome Professor Baldez. So welcome aboard. Thank you everyone for being with us here on a holiday. Professor Gordon-Reed, over to you.
Thank you so much. And I'm very Happy to be here with you this holiday, this first official celebration of the holiday. We did something last year, but this is the first year that we've actually had an opportunity to prepare to celebrate Juneteenth. My book is something of a departure from me. I write about Virginia usually. I write about other people's families, the Hemingses and Jeffersons and Randolphs and so forth. I don't write about Texas. I haven't written about Texas that much, not in any extended period, in extended work. I decided to do this during the pandemic in consultation with my editor, who has always wanted me to write a big book about Texas. And I have thought about that, and I may actually do it, but I decided at this time that it might be a good idea to do something smaller and more intimate, and to sort of go back to a style of writing that I used to do when I was a young person, wanting to be a writer, the essay form. So I decided to meld my personal story, the story of my family, with the history of Texas. I've lived in the Northeast for a number of years, and I very often find myself having to explain Texas to people. And so I thought that this was an opportunity to do those two things, is to bring a personal story into the picture, but at the same time, tell people something about a state that garners a lot of attention. And unfortunately, it's not always good attention. It's quite often in the news and has been recently on many occasions. And I've had to explain to people what it's all about. I wanted to talk a little about the image of Texas and how people don't see it as a slave state, a slave society, even though it was part of the Cotton Empire. Juneteenth, June 19th, 1865, which commemorates the day that Granger goes to Texas and goes to Galveston specifically, to make the announcement that slavery is over, after the Army of the Trans-Mississippi had continued fighting in that area, long after, or months after Lee had surrendered in April. They kept fighting, and they don't surrender until the beginning of June. And that's when Granger goes in to make this announcement and says that slavery is over, and says also that the former enslaved people would then occupy a state of absolute equality with other people in society, which of course he could not decree, but he is referencing, I believe, making the connection to the American Declaration of Independence, those famous words in the preamble that suggest at the beginning of it, that suggest that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. And it makes equality at the basis of American life. That's an important value, and it becomes part of Americans' creed. And so the book talks about how we have lived up to that, how we have not lived up to that. And I do it by talking about the various people who live in Texas: European Americans, Anglo-Europeans, African Americans, indigenous people, people of Spanish descent. Texas has always been a diverse place from the very beginning. It didn't have to become diverse. It's always been diverse. And in a way, it is sort of a microcosm of America. So by talking about the Texas story, I really hope to be talking as well about the American story. And it was a wonderful book to write. It put me back in touch with my parents, who are no longer living, but thinking about our lives together and finding out things about my family that I didn't know. So it was a journey for me doing it. And I'm just enormously gratified that people have found it worthwhile and have paid attention to it. And it's meant a lot to me to be able to bring part of myself to the story at the same time as I tell the larger story of Texas, and as I say, of America. So now I would like to be joined by Lisa. We're going to have a conversation about this and answer some of your questions. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Annette. It's really thrilling to be here talking with you about this on this day of all days. And thanks for everybody for putting this together to give us the opportunity to really reflect on Juneteenth. As Margaret mentioned, there's a lot of terrific questions from the audience, and I will get to those. I will get to as many as I can. Annette, the book is about Texas, but you spent part of the weekend, this past weekend in Virginia. You were at Monticello, and you were at an event The event was called Descendant, the Power of Descendant Communities to Shape Our Stories, Places, and Future. Sounds like it was an incredible event. Can you just give us a little taste of what it was like to be there and what happened?
It was wonderful. It was wonderful. It was their version of a Juneteenth celebration. They have done something like this before, but this was the largest, I'm told, gathering of descendants of people who had been enslaved at Monticello. And they came together for this a family reunion and to commemorate the day Juneteenth. And it was wonderful. There was a moment that everybody's talked about. I was on a panel with Darren Walker of the Ford Foundation and Clint Smith, How the Word is Passed. And we were speaking, very, very earnestly about various things, sitting there on the West Lawn, the sort of view of Monticello that's the most famous, on the nickel, on the back of the nickel. And we were on that lawn. And we're talking very earnestly, but the kids were behind us and it was dark and they were playing on the West Lawn. And I thought about the fact, and other people noticed it as well, that they were playing with the freedom and abandon that their ancestors could never have done when they were little kids in that same space. I looked and saw later on the next day, similar scene with kids running around, the great grandsons of Madison Hemings and therefore Sally Hemings and Thomas Jefferson, 3 of them running around the lawn, just in a state of complete, not understanding really the magnitude of all of this. This will come home to them as they get to be older. But it was that kind of day because it's a scene of great beauty. It was wonderful weather and so forth, but we understood that we were on a place that was a slave plantation. It's easy to forget that at Monticello. It's so beautiful. You go up there and you see the view off the mountain to all of the trees looking out on the great vista, but you don't realize that those trees wouldn't have been there. Those would have been fields and there would have been people working in them, but that's all gone now. So it's very, very important to try to evoke that for people. And they do that at the Thomas Jefferson Foundation. I'm on the board and we try to do that through the docents and the education that's done there. But this weekend was just a special occasion to see people who were tied to one another by the experiences of their ancestors. And they have become friends and met people. And I'm sure this will be done again.
I love that. And I love thinking about those kids. And you were at you were actually in Texas about a week or so ago, and you were in your hometown of Conroe, and you were meeting the faculty at the Annette Gordon-Reed Elementary School.
Yes. Yes.
Talk about amazing transformation of history. It appears to have just opened. I wonder if you could tell us about that. And how does it feel to have become a historical figure as well as an historian?
Well, it will be open this fall. They're still building it. I unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to drive by. I had planned to do that, but I was sort of in and out of the town. It's enormously gratifying. It's the deepest honor that I've had to have an elementary school named after me. I mean, the genesis of it really is that when I was a child, at 6, I integrated the schools of my town. The school had been resisting Brown for over a decade. And according to something called a freedom of choice plan, where whites were supposed to pick white schools and blacks were supposed to pick black schools, my parents sent me to a white school. And so I integrated our town school. I was there by myself as a first grader. And surely other things have happened to me, have, stoked it along as well, but that's the basis of it. And I'm enormously proud. I wish my parents would have been over the moon about something like this happening, but I'm glad that my other family members and friends of my mother, it was really wonderful. Friends who taught with my mother came to the event, and some of her students, and it meant a lot to me. I'm going to go there in October, where the school will open and then they'll have a dedication and a ceremony, but I'll go in October and do that. And it'll be deeply emotional, I'm sure. And I'm just very proud. We are the Cubs. We are the Tiger Cubs. we have a mascot, and it's wonderful. I can't wait to get the swag from that. And all of my friends are asking me about t-shirts. But it's great fun, and it's just a deep honor. I resisted for a number of years because, I think you should name things after people later. No, about living. I'm not planning on doing anything crazy, but my husband said, your parents would have wanted this so much. Go ahead. And so I said yes. And this year they made the decision.
I love that. And I love the way that you use stories from your childhood to animate this historical exploration on Juneteenth. In your book on Thomas Jefferson and Sally Hemings, you wrote about how you first got interested in Thomas Jefferson when you were in the third grade.
Yes.
And you read a biography of Thomas Jefferson.
Mm-hmm.
And so clearly this book is an extension of that.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about the way in which you connect an experience from your childhood to the history of Texas that you want to tell us in the book?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think, I'm certain all of us could do this. All of us could tell the story of our state, a part of our country, based upon the things that are going on at that particular moment. I mean, historians, as you well know, context is everything. It's not just the person, it's the person in relationship to other people, the person in relationship to the times. I get to write about, I'm a child of the 70s, and that was a time of great interest in Native Americans and indigenous people in a way that was good and bad, some romanticizing and so forth. But the American Indian movement was very strong during that time period. And the fashion was in fashion. And I started going with my family to the Alabama Coshada Indian Reservation, which was just 17 miles from where I was born in Livingston, Texas. And the title of the chapter is The People of the Past and the Present, because I say, on one hand, growing up, Native Americans were seen as people who were here, but gone. They used to be here and now they don't exist anymore, but they did, they did and do. And so I wanted to talk about the fact that, I had this experience of when I visited my grandparents and my cousins and we always went out there, and it was wonderful, a lot of fun thing to do. But I was also seeing in the news about various things that were happening in the Native American movement, and how it was sort of a nationwide interest here. And so that's a part of Texas that people think of cowboys and Indians, that the sort of Hollywood version of it, but in this sense that these people are gone, but they're actually there. And I wanted to try to bring them back into the story. I say in the book that Texas is seen as a white man, essentially, constructed as a white man. And so part of the book is about repeopling it, bringing other people into the mix. And I do that by talking about how I learned about these people and how my connections to these people, and with an anecdote, and then going into the larger story, because it's about me and my family, but it's really about Texas. And so that's what it is, just sort of a setting the scene to try to get the reader to personalize it enough to gather, to capture the reader's interest, and then broaden it out to talk about the history of that time.
I love the way that you use your personal stories as a portal into the broader history. And you mentioned in history, context is everything. And you pack a lot of wisdom about the craft of writing history into this slender volume. One of the quotes that really struck me, you said you write that writers and consumers of history must take great care not to import the knowledge we have into the minds of people and of circumstances in the past. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if you could talk about the context in which you make that statement, and then also, how do we avoid importing or imposing the knowledge that we have now into the past?
Well, it's hard. Well, it's hard to do. That's part of the craft of it. And sometimes you succeed and sometimes you don't, but you just have to keep reminding yourself. they don't know what's going to happen. We know what's going to happen. They don't know what's going to happen. And you have to try to have enough imagination. And history, and I've said in another book, history is, to a degree, an imaginative enterprise. You have to think about, well, what would it be like in a situation where you don't know what's going to happen? You have a plan about how things are going to work out, and you don't know that it's going to go awry. It's not even close to working. So you just have to keep reminding yourself. Now, that to me doesn't equate with, and people say forgiving, this is a person of their time. And so therefore you don't make any, you don't have any opinion about what the person is doing, but you just have to have some degree of humility about, what we know. We know what we know because other people have taught us. We've had many, many experiences. We've seen how things have played themselves out. And so we have a general knowledge that those people don't know, but you just have to try to imagine it. And to remind yourself, we know the answer and they don't. So what does it look like not to know the answer? And you can kind of compare it to the situation we're in now, where we think there are things that we want to do and plans that best laid plans that we put out there, and we have no idea where it's going. We don't, we just can't be sure, but we're doing the best that we could do with what we have. So I think it requires humility and just reminding yourself, that it's not clear to people. It's clear more to some people than others. Now, then you have moments where some people during the same time period know better necessarily than the subject that you're talking about or the people that you're talking about. So then you say, well, what made the difference in their lives? How do they come to this conclusion? And this other person is still not getting it. But you're dealing with human beings. And so there's just a lot of complexity there that has to be worked out. But that's part of the fun of history and the difficulty of it.
I love starting with that idea that they don't know what's going to happen. And so to try to get in that mindset. Mm-hmm. So we're here tonight on behalf of American Ancestors, and a lot of American Ancestors' most popular programs are focused on conducting family history and conducting history. And so I wanted to delve into that a little bit more, into the kind of nitty gritty of the specifics of how you do the work that you do. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about some of the sources that you used in conducting the research for this book? Mm-hmm. and kind of put us in the situation where you're looking at a document? First of all, how do you choose, if you can just walk us through the process of discernment, what's significant, what can be set aside? Mm-hmm. How do you do that as an historian? And are there lessons that can be distilled out for some of the people in the audience for whom mm-hmm. history is a passion and mm-hmm. a hobby?
Well, this is an interesting book because it's short and it's not research dense in the way that the Hemingses of Monticello, which is 800 pages and over a couple of hundred pages worth of endnotes. It's a very different kind of enterprise. With that, it involved, taking each chapter and, just block by block building, building on that and saying, I've got to find out what happened in France. So I have to find out about 18th century Black people in France. What are the things that I need to know to be able to paint a picture of this particular place? This was a bit different. I wrote this book during the pandemic, and I was here in Manhattan, ground zero for the pandemic. There were no archives that were open. I didn't really need to go to any archives to do the kinds of things that I wanted to do. Many of the sources were online. Fortunately, things were online. So I was using things like ancestry.com. There are, the libraries have some of their material online. The Texas History Society has a wonderful website with lots of different information on it. It involved thinking, well, what is the story that I want to tell? What's important for me to say to the readers about the Alamo? Redoing the story of the Alamo, or thinking about the story of the Alamo and the people at the Alamo, for example, William Barrett Travis, Jim Bowie, Davy Crockett, these people who are iconic figures, but who have in many ways feet of clay. Jim Bowie's a slave trader. William Travis left a wife and little children in Alabama, one step ahead of creditors, and comes to Texas to make a new life for himself, and may have wanted to get married again, apparently, while he was still married. I mean, he's not the sort of dashing, handsome figure that Lawrence Harvey played in the movie The Alamo. So I had to read biographies of those people. I had to, do little research into each one of them so that I could bring their basic story to the picture. It involves sitting down thinking of what is it that you think the reader needs, what is it that you're trying to say, number one, and what is it that you think the reader needs to know, and how do you bring that to them? And that required, as I said, discovering who Jim Bowie actually was, and Travis, and talking about the Texians. Who were they? What were their motivations? They wanted a republic for Texas, but they wanted a republic for reasons that are not all so great. I mean, Santa Anna did suspend the Constitution. There were cultural differences. There was a language difference, but they also wanted to preserve the institution of slavery. So that's not something that was emphasized very much in my 4th and 7th grade Texas history classes, or probably not so much I think I may have taken the elective in high school as well. In 3 years of Texas history, I learned that pretty much on my own, that Mexico had outlawed slavery and given the Texians an exemption, but they were not trustful. They were mistrustful that they would stick to that. So, what do you do if you're a Black Texan? Or even if you're white and you're anti-slavery? How do you process that to know that this republic that we were always taught to be proud of, has a constitution that explicitly, protects slavery and says that Black people can't immigrate there without permission and can't stay there. So, those kinds of things. I had to talk about that language. I mean, the best thing to do is not to just sort of make the argument or saying like I'm talking now, to actually have the language of the Constitution in the book so people can say and see, look, this is what it is. People talked about this. We didn't just start talking about race in the past 10 years. People in the 18th and the 19th century talked about race a lot in their laws, in their writings. And so, yeah, it was finding documents that bring home points that you think that people may not know and haven't focused on, and actually reproducing them in the work.
So speaking of that, in the last chapter, you started by talking about the Glen Campbell song, Galveston. Mm-hmm. And I have just been on, for whatever reason, a Glen Campbell tear lately, listening to him all the time. So that certainly resonated with me. It's an amazing song.
It's a beautiful song.
He's a great songwriter.
No, he didn't. Jimmy Webb wrote this. He wrote The Wichita Lineman and General. I mean, those things. No, he's a great writer.
So good.
And you can just, the wonderful thing about it is that it's like a poem or whatever. It could mean something to different people. It resonates. Yeah, just a great, but a great performance too by Campbell. But
then you smoothly transport me from that to the words of Alexander Stephens, the vice president of the Confederacy in 1861, the great truth that the Negro is not equal to the white man, and this just unbelievable statement. That's really, it's extraordinary writing. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Can you talk about you've talked a little bit about the writing and how you, you kind of structured these things. Were there things, that to me suggests a lot of edits, a lot of work went into doing something that tight. Can you talk about things that might have gotten cut from the book?
Well, not a lot of things cut, actually. I pretty much figured out what I wanted to say. Again, for the Hemingses, for something like that, I have a document that I call that I basically called rough cuts, and all the darlings that I have killed, I take them and put them in that outtakes is actually what it's called, and then put them in the outtakes. Don't have a big outtake section for this one because it really, I mean, I thought it was much more about a feeling that's propelling me because I'm talking about myself and my family and my state and what it is that I wanted to say about it, rather than I was more in sight of it than I was that I am in other books that I've done, which are about other people. And so there's a detachment and more of an uncertainty, I think, about, you know, what it is that I want to do. This just sort of came out, and I found things that I didn't expect, you know, that were surprising to me and that I didn't expect to see, finding my great-great-grandfather's name on a voter's list in 1867, tooling through ancestry.com and thinking, wow, you know, here's a person who had been treated as property, and now he was down on the list to be to participate in the United States and Texas as a citizen. And so I felt tremendous pride at that, but at the same time, I felt sad because I knew what was going to happen, that the redemption governments would come in and, you know, take away the right to vote, and we'd have to fight for that again. And now, strangely enough, we seem to be fighting for that again here in 2022. So it really, there were fewer moments, fewer things to throw away. What I had a real decision is how much of myself of us I wanted to be in the book. I mentioned my mother and father's name. I mentioned my name, obviously. I didn't want this to be, I wanted it to be about my family, but I wanted it to be about my family, not as individuals, but as the roles that they were playing, grandfather, great-grandfather. And so that could be anybody, other people whose families can tell similar stories, and not getting bogged down in, and then, you know, begats, that kind of thing, and have it much more open. So it went pretty smoothly, actually.
There's something that seems so, the book seems so fit to the moment of the pandemic, and the emotion and the human connection that at least I was feeling in that context.
Yeah.
You know, since the book came out last year, you have given scores and scores of talks so generously about the book. What have you learned from these conversations that you've had? What has surprised you?
Well, the response to it has surprised me. I didn't, you know, this is a book that didn't exist in my mind more than 2 years ago. I mean, the Hemingses, other books that I've written were years thinking about, not the first one. The first one was pretty fast too, but it surprised me that it has resonated with people. And I think it has to do, it's the moment that we're in. You said it's the pandemic is a big part of it. And that's what propelled me to write it, because I really wanted to get close to my mother and father who are no longer living, and to sort of relive the times with them. But I also think the murder of George Floyd, that focused a lot of attention on Juneteenth, because, you know, May to June, and people were asking, what, you know, and all over the world, people were saying Black Lives Matter, and people were trying to figure out, you know, where did this start? How do we get in this particular place? And I think people focused on slavery, on the institution of slavery and the legacies of slavery. So Juneteenth is a day for celebration as we think about how the people at the time celebrated, but it's also a day to think about roads not taken, you know, goals still to be attained, aspirations still to be attained. And I think, you know, that's the response has, well, shocked me, but I think it's driven by a desire and a hunger to come to grips with what Juneteenth means. On Juneteenth, but it's about the day on Juneteenth, but it's also about everything around it. What led up to it, why was it necessary, what happened after it was over, and we're still, 1865 to 1965, and I'm integrating a school because the promise of Juneteenth still had not been realized, but people were trying to do that, trying to get to that equality that that Granger talks about in General Order number 3, as I'm integrating schools in a town that was a site of lynchings, where a person was burned at the stake on Courthouse Square in the 1920s, where a man who was accused of raping a white woman with whom he was apparently having an affair was murdered in the courtroom in front of the judge and the jury and spectators and everybody, and was tried but was acquitted in a few minutes, and everybody cheered. That happened, just 25 years or so before I went to Anderson Elementary School, and some of the people who were involved in that, people who knew about that, were still alive. It's the point of all of this, and what I hope people understood, is that we're not far from all of this. This is all in the terms of history, just in the blink of the eye. And so that explains a lot about where we are today, is that we're still grappling with the meaning of that particular time. And we have a ways to go.
I'm going to turn to some of these fantastic questions that are coming in from the audience. And there's one, it's perhaps the question, and it's being posed in the Q&A by Matthew Carney III. I finished reading your book today. Given all the reactionary political events in Texas, and I would say beyond it, what do you believe will help resolve the polarization in our country? By the way, I just watched this afternoon the C-SPAN from the 100th anniversary at the Lincoln Memorial. Thank you for your scholarship. And that is a sentiment echoed time and time again by many of the people that have posed questions.
Well, that's a very tough question. I think, what can we do? I think having the kinds of conversations that we're having, that's one of the reasons I think it's been important to talk about this book, because I have been able to have engagements with audiences all over the country, and the tremendous interest that people have in this subject matter. I think it's going to take allies, and by this I mean white people, just as it was with the abolitionists, just as happened with the civil rights movement, to begin to talk to one another, to talk to their family members, to talk to their friends, to model behavior that suggests that, that reaffirms the humanity of people of color. We don't have the numbers in here to force anything, African Americans, given where we are population wise. But whenever there have been advances, it's been because people of goodwill have said, whatever it is that I'm getting out of this, it's not worth it to me to keep up this system of oppression and to speak out against it. Abolitionists, they were not perfect, but they did understand that slavery, treating African American people like property, or treating people like property, was wrong. And they spoke out against that. Southerners, white Southerners who were part of the civil rights movement, and white Northerners who came down with freedom riders and so forth. So I think that's the next thing. Allies have to become not just aware themselves and, supportive, that's important as well, but to really, when you have an opportunity, however you can, to stand up for the humanity of people of color, and to bring family and friends along as much as you possibly can. I talk in the book about having friends who would be friendly to me in school, and then I would see them out with their families and they wouldn't be friendly. And I realized that in a way I was asking them to make a choice for their friendship with me or their family. Now I understand little kids are going to choose their parents. They're going to choose the people who they love, whom they love, and can't articulate, what is going on and why it's not right to be that way. But I think by the time we get to be adults, we can have those kinds of tough discussions with family members. And some of them are not going to change, but they certainly won't change if they're not challenged in any fashion. So I think that's the first step. Blacks should not be in the position of saying, I shouldn't have to say, I'm a person, I'm a human being, and here's why you ought to treat me. No, that has to come among allies who will, hopefully some of their family and friends who love them will consider and maybe come along.
Thank you. So Juneteenth has become the holiday, June 19th being the day. But talking about history being contingent and not knowing how things are going to unfold, we have two questions that kind of talk about other possibilities. One is, why should Black people, this is a question from an audience member, two questions. Why should Black people from around the country embrace June 19th when their forefathers knew they were free before June 19th? And then another person asked, New Jersey did not end enslavement until 1866. Why are these people's last 6 months of enslavement unrecognized?
Well, there are two things. I think it's true. Slavery legally ends in the United States with the ratification of the 13th Amendment in December of 1865. What June 19th represents was the defeat of the military effort to maintain the system of slavery. Slavery ended not just by law. Slavery ended with the breakdown of law, unfortunately. It took a war. It took violence to end that. And in June, as I suggested, the beginning of June of 1865, the Confederate Army finally gave up. And they gave up largely, they were defeated, largely because, in large measure, because of the thousands of Black men who left the plantations and joined the United States Army and helped defeat the Confederates. I think that that's something that's worthwhile celebrating. And it is hugely, well, it's not just symbolic, it was force that brought this about. And so what I'm hoping is that Juneteenth will become like an umbrella celebration. Emancipation was a process. As I mentioned earlier, it's enslaved people left the plantations, men, women, and children. Men went off to the army. That was a part of emancipation. The Army of the United States, as it moved through the land, liberated people as well when they took over and freed enslaved people. So I think Juneteenth can stand for all of that. Now, Juneteenth is the day because Texans were chauvinistic about this. Texans, I said at first I had sort of a proprietary, in the beginning of the book, attitude about Juneteenth. And I didn't realize that what had happened is that Black Texans, when they joined the Great Migration and went places, they took the holiday with them. And I don't know that Black people in other states did that to the same extent. Maybe they're not moving in the same way others are, but I think it really is the tenacity and the arrogance of Texans to say, yes, we have this holiday and now you should celebrate it too. I mean, we kept it alive 157 years. Wherever we went, we told this story about this, and I'm not certain that other people did in the same way.
That makes a lot of sense. Another question, what resources do you suggest to help students learn more about this? And by this, I think there's lots of things that are suggested.
Well, one of the great things about where we are right now is that there are so many books for children about Juneteenth. And they are tailored to each, to almost every age group, little kids, kindergarten people, young adults, other folks. There's a lot of information. Henry Louis Gates has a site. My colleague at Harvard has a site called What is Juneteenth? And if you go on the Google and type that in, it will come up, and there are lots of resources about books about it, articles about it. It explains the day and so forth. I really do think that it wasn't just, it was George Floyd, but I think social media, the internet has also been responsible for spreading the word about Juneteenth, because there's so many resources. Now, like anything, you have to be discerning in how you see these things. But I think books and the site that I gave you, Gates, and he has another one, I think he's added to it, that that will expand on the discussion of Juneteenth. So there's a lot of stuff out there for people. We're living sort of, and we have been, as you probably know, in the last, well, almost 50 years, a golden age in the historiography of slavery and writing about slavery, and just lots of things that are coming up. And Juneteenth is a part of that now.
You, when you started talking, you said big history of Texas, and I have a feeling maybe that's in the future. A question from the audience member: where do you get the inspiration for your books? And can you talk about your upcoming book? Or in other words, what are you working on now?
Well, there are things that come to me just out of nowhere in a way, things that I get interested in. I love to write, but I love to research too. I like to, it's the detective aspect of this things that's really, really attractive to me. And so, I'm supposed to be writing a book about, I'm supposed to be doing I'm finishing, my next book is actually a second volume of the Hemings family story. I'm taking them into the 19th century and talking about the Civil War, and one line that stays in the Black community and one line that goes into the white community. And, talking about, in one group of people fight in the Union Army as Black people, and their first cousins fight as white people, and they're indistinguishable physically. But one, so they decide to stay in the community, in one community, and the other goes into another community. And Jefferson's legal grandson for a time is the Secretary of War for the Confederacy. So you have these lines of people, all from Monticello, who are in this conflict in different ways. And so it's a really interesting story. So that's what I'm working on now. I'm supposed to be doing a 2-volume biography of Jefferson, a big book about Texas. I don't know that I have that much time. I mean, something would have to go here. But right now I'm just finishing up the Hemingses, and we'll see what comes after that.
Well, I'm excited about that, and I think that's fantastic. A question from someone in the audience, Russell Larkin. Can you talk a bit about how Frederick Douglass's speech, what to the slave is 4th of July, in terms of Juneteenth?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a wonderful oration, and it goes to the point that I was making about the Declaration being alluding to as sort of an America's creed, and this notion of equality, because obviously he's speaking ironically and saying, you brought me here to celebrate this stuff, but as a matter of fact, there's a problem. I think Juneteenth and July 4th are connected. And I did an op-ed about this for the Times, because I heard that people were upset. Some people were saying, well, you're trying to take away from July 4th with Juneteenth, and saying that this is, the real Freedom Day or whatever. But I think they're related, and they're related on that point of equality. And Douglass is making this challenge to say, you have this words that talks about freedom and liberty and so forth. And then you have all of these people, you have these people who are held in bondage. And the person who wrote these words had held people in bondage too. So he's pointing out the hypocrisy of it. But I think, in the end, obviously he embraces, as many African-American people did, the American Declaration of Independence because of those words. It's not tied to just any one man. It's about the sentiment that's advanced there. And I think Juneteenth and General Order Number 3, talking about absolute equality, and those two things go together. They should be seen as tied together because they both reference the American creed. And what Douglass is doing is saying, live up to your promise. And African American people have used the Declaration. Well, actually, every group that has tried to make a place for itself in American society looks to the Declaration as a promise, in a way, as an aspiration for us to live up to in the founding document. So I think they work together, and that will become apparent as we get used to celebrating Juneteenth and sort of work things out. I think it will be clear the connection between the two of them.
You mentioned the piece that you wrote for the Times. In today's New York Times, they reported on, well, two things that struck me. One was plans for a Juneteenth museum in Fort Worth, Texas.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And then this really lovely set of photographs of heirlooms that Black families have kept to remember their past. Mm-hmm. So the museum, thinking about objects around Juneteenth and this photographic essay about heirlooms. Do you have any family heirlooms or any sacred objects that you associate with your family history, maybe especially around Juneteenth?
Not necessarily about Juneteenth, but my great-grandmother's churn, butter churn, old sewing machines, furniture, things of that nature. I remember, well, I talk about this in the book, and I haven't done it for a while, but the fact that we made tamales, I mean, the sort of Texas influence of European American food, African American food, and Mesoamerican food all together for celebrating Juneteenth. But yes, I do have some heirlooms and things that I cherish. And we sold our family home in Conroe a couple of years ago. So I don't have, my mother's friends are still there, and so I will go back and visit them, but I don't have a family in that particular place anymore. And they're sort of bittersweet to have this, but it's good to have the mementos.
That's lovely. So I think we're just about to the end of our questions, and I wondered if we could hear a little bit from Annette Reading.
I would love to do that.
Professor Gordon-Reed and Professor Baldez, thank you so much for this fascinating conversation. It's really such a fitting celebration of this national holiday, looking at the process of emancipation and how we all get educated. We are so grateful for your insight and your truth-telling and your detective work. Love that detective work. As we do for all our American Inspiration authors, as Professor Baldez said, we've asked Professor Gordon-Reed to read to us briefly from the book. In closing, Professor Gordon-Reed, over to you.
Okay, right, thank you. This is a coda to the book. The reader might ask, after all of this, what is it that I love about the state of Texas? Having questioned the value of love based on legend and myth, how should I feel about the history that is left? This brief sketch of the history of Texas, told through the vignette to my family, calls to mind something I've often written and said about Jefferson's musing in Notes on the State of Virginia on African Americans' prospects in the United States, and what he wrote in his will about the 5 men he freed. Jefferson wrote in the notes that an enslaved person, which because of the racially based nature of slavery in the country meant a Black person, could not love the country in which he or she lived. How could they love a country that did not love them, as evidenced by the way the country had treated them? Therefore, Blacks would be happier in some other place, their own country, free from the racial strife that he couldn't see as anything other than inevitable. In his will freeing the 5 men, however, Jefferson petitioned the legislature to allow them to remain in the state. He had to do this because, according to Virginia law, an enslaved person who did not get permission to remain in Virginia within a year after emancipation could be sold back into slavery. When explaining why these men should be allowed to stay, Jefferson said, because Virginia was where, quote, their families and connections, unquote, were. At the level of theorizing about nations and country, it was easy to speak in the abstract, the slave, the country. When dealing with the lives of actual known people that mattered to him, the focus became sharp and clear. Abstract notions of the United States, of Virginia, of Texas, for me at least, don't capture why places are worthy of love. When asked, as I have very often been, to explain what I love about Texas, given all that I know of what has happened there and is still happening there, The best response I can give is that this is where my first family and connections were. It's where I lived with my mother, my father, and brothers. It's where I rode back and forth between Conroe and Livingston to visit my grandparents, aunts, and cousins. It's where my father drove me 35 miles to Huntsville at my mother's behest for piano lessons with Mrs. Tulls, who had been a professional classical pianist. What was my mother thinking was going to happen with that? In other words, Texas is where my mother's boundless dreams for me took flight. It's also where I learned to think that people could and should try in whatever way they can to make life better for others alive today and for those to come. That this feeling, this thought, came to me in a place that was at once so very difficult, so full of good things and so full of potential, shaped my thinking and actions in important ways. About the difficulties of Texas, love does not require taking an uncritical stance toward the objects of one's affections. In truth, it often requires the opposite. We can't be of real service to the hopes we have for places and people, ourselves included, without a clear-eyed assessment of their and our strengths and weaknesses. That often demands a willingness to be critical, sometimes deeply so. How that is done matters, of course. Striking the right balance can be exceedingly hard. I hope I've achieved the proper equilibrium.
We feel you have. Thank you so much. What a remarkable passage. And thank you for sharing your family story and the importance of family, and even more so, Professor Gordon-Reed, for bringing us along. How lucky we are to have you with us tonight. Many thanks to you, and thank you to Professor Baldez. A reminder to our audience, copies of On Juneteenth, the book, Annette Gordon-Reed's marvelous work of history and family, is available from Porter Square Books in Cambridge, Mass. Order online using the code AMINTS22, and the copy they send you will come signed by Professor Gordon-Reed. Moving toward closing, Kristen, do you want to share a bit of news from the BPL, and then Beth, and then we'll move right along, everybody heading to dinner. Go ahead, Kristen.
Thank you, Margaret. And thank you, Professors Gordon-Reed and Baldez, for sharing your conversation with us. The Boston Public Library books, music, films, archival collections, including the anti-slavery collection, and more, as well as services and events, are free to all and for people of all ages. You can find out more at bpl.org, or you can visit your local branch, and we have programs both in person and online. Thank you all for being here with us tonight. Beth, over to you.
Thank you to all who participated tonight. So the Massachusetts State House and the State Library of Massachusetts are now back open to the public, and we hope that all of you, including our speakers, will feel welcome to visit us soon. We invite our viewers today to start with our website to learn more about our resources, our services, and our great collections. To get started, you can type in a really simple version of our URL, mass.gov/LIB, that will take you right to our homepage. You can see from this slide that our collections at the State Library cover a wide variety of formats and topics, though most of our holdings document the Massachusetts history and government. We have a large amount of material relating to the Commonwealth, and every week more and more of it is available through our digital repository. So please do see the links in the chat for more information. We have no author talks scheduled for the immediate future, but the library is open and ready to help you with your research, so we hope to see you soon. So back to Margaret.
Thank you, Beth. We at NEHGS are delighted to have co-presented today's book talk. If you're researching a time in history, a community, a family, you will find our library and education center useful. Our stacks on Newbury Street in Boston are open to the public, and NEHGS members can delve into our digital archives, gaining access anytime to 1.4 billion searchable family records. Free to the public, you can chat online with one of our genealogists, doing your own detective work. Our Brew Family Learning Center hosts many educational programs aimed at all levels of historians. On July 9, you can join our genealogists for a program in Chicago. or come to Boston mid-month of July to get guidance on writing your family history. We host many virtual education programs as well. And for you literary sorts like me, we're continuing our virtual author talks. On July 7 at 1 p.m., we'll gain insight into women in the Gilded Age from Laura Thompson, the author of Heiresses, The Lives of the $1 Million Babies, and Betsy Prelow, whose acclaimed work, Diamonds and Deadlines, reveals the unconventional life of the publisher, Mrs. Frank Leslie. These two authors will be joined by moderator Esther Crane, an expert on New York in the Gilded Age. She created and curates the best-loved website and blog, Ephemeral New York. On July 14, we'll welcome the retired CNBC anchor, Bill Griffith, with his new work, Strangers No More. This true family story follows his best-selling book about a DNA discovery that rocked his world. He'll be in conversation with journalist Libby Copeland, the author of The Lost Family. And on August 22, join us for a look at the history of alcohol and its intersection with medicine. Cocktails and spirits expert Camper English will discuss his new book, Doctors and Distillers, with moderator Richard Ford Thompson, the Stanford law professor and author of Dress Codes. This should be a fun summer night, a mix of education and entertainment. And back to this evening, our mission at NEHGS is to educate, inspire, and connect people. We hope we've accomplished that in the past hour. To tonight's esteemed professors, thank you from all of us for your conversation, your work, your detective work. We are very grateful. The BPL, the State Library, we are all so glad to have been part of this program, especially on this important Juneteenth holiday. And thank you to our audience for joining this gathering and for putting your mind to work and bringing us along and bringing those around you along too. So we'll see you soon again. Good night to everyone, and thank you.